بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So our guest tonight is, I think it's the first guest maybe I don't know from before. So inshallah, this is going to be a good opportunity for me also to get to know you and from your bio and from what I've heard about you from Brother Ibrahim Fontaine. I'm really excited. So our guest is Naji Mujahid. I sent out the bio that you sent me to the participants. Just so you have an idea, the people in the session are either high school to like early college age, and the idea is to expose them to careers usually off the beaten path, so not medical or engineering or IT, which are highly represented in the Muslim community. And so we've talked to all sorts of different kinds of people. I think you are the first lawyer. We do have one more lawyer coming on this week with a different focus. He's a defense attorney. So I'm really excited. From your bio, also, it looks like you've done a lot of interesting things. Brother Naji, can you kind of give us a sense of what is the work that you do?
Well, I guess it could be, some people call it poverty law, because you're providing legal services to people who can't afford it. So when I started my career, I was a public defender, and which is providing criminal defense to people who can't afford an attorney. And from there, I went into private practice, but COVID put an end to that. Courts closed, and I hadn't built up enough business to be able to sustain. So, but eventually I was able to get back into the type of work I'm doing now, which currently, currently I'm at Philadelphia Legal Assistance, which is a legal aid organization which provides free civil legal services to people who can't afford it. The unit in particular that I work in is called the Medical Legal Community Partnership Unit, which is a relatively new concept. They've only been having these medical legal partnerships for about 20 years. And so what they do is work with the hospitals or healthcare centers and such, and they embed attorneys inside of the hospital or the healthcare center, or somewhere where medical services are being offered, to broaden the spectrum of care for their patients, with the understanding that often the stuff that people are dealing with on the outside have a negative impact on their health. So often people are in situations where they're dealing with a legal issue. Sometimes they don't realize it's a legal issue, or they just don't have access to assistance. And so since I've been working here, I've handled a lot of different kind of cases: landlord-tenant, Social Security, public benefits, family law, custody, and some other some other areas. So it's kind of a generalist practice, which has been kind of cool. But this is my last week here, and next week I start the job that's actually more reflected in the bio as my current job, which is at Tzedek DC, which is an organization that provides free legal or free defense in the area of debt collection. So people being hounded and harassed by creditors and stuff. So I'll be there doing that. But again, it's my career has been all about providing legal services to people who need it and can't afford it.
In terms of pay, so you mentioned private practice. I would imagine that's where you would be able to get paid kind of a higher salary. Is that the case? And then like these other organizations you work for, how does the pay compare? Is it like livable or no? It's very low.
When you're in private practice, it's not a salary at all. It's you're an entrepreneur. So you're getting paid according to whatever you charge and the amount of business that you're able to bring in. So There's obviously more potential for growth and to make more money depending on your clients and the kind of cases that you're doing, and I guess the area of law that you're focused in. You know, but in the career field, you know, I've been in, it depends on where you are. Some places pay more than others. You know, the last job, or like I said, the current job, they're unionized, and so how much you make is going to depend on how many years you've been practicing law. You know, so it depends. So as a public defender, like I said, some places pay more than others. Like, and each system is different. So,
but so far in your experience, has it like what you've been able to get paid, has it been sufficient for like what you need for your family and all, or no, then you have to moonlight or do something else to supplement? Is it that low, or no, it's a livable pay?
there have been times where you know, it's been tight. I mean, you know, it's been sufficient, but you know, it's been tight. You know, like you're definitely not, you know, you're not going to get rich, you know, doing like legal aid kind of services. But you know, after a while, I mean, you'll be making, you know, six figures, you know, eventually. But you're not going to come in at six figures, that's for sure. Coming in, again, depending on where you are, it'll probably be between, you know, 50 and 80, like coming out of law school. But some places like California, their public defenders, and I imagine their legal aid organizations too, they pay a living wage according to where they are. So you'll start off, like if you were a public defender and in California, you'd probably be starting off at six figures, depending on which county you're in. But you know, six figures might not go as far in California as it would here. So it depends. The right to an attorney has only been around for about a little over 60 years, I think. And so there was a case called Gideon v. Wainwright, where in Florida, a guy, he had broken into a bar and broke into a cigarette machine. The young people on this call, they probably never seen a cigarette machine before, but they used to have vending machines for cigarettes. Anyway, he broke in, he takes the quarters or whatever, he gets arrested. And so, you know, he's facing, you know, some, you know, charges, facing some time and some penalties. And he represented himself and argued that like he should have an attorney. And long story short, it was that case that eventually made its way to the Supreme Court and established you know, the right to counsel. So like you see on TV, someone gets arrested, you have a right to remain silent, you have a right to an attorney. But the thing is, they required every state to provide you know, an attorney to people who can't afford it, but they didn't tell them how. So every state may be a little bit different with how those services are delivered. Some places like, where are you all at?
Some are in Chicago, some are in the DC, like Virginia area. Where else?
Okay.
That I think that's pretty much everyone here right now.
Okay. So some places like Maryland, for example, Maryland has a state-run system. Office of the Public Defender in Maryland, you're a state employee, you work for the state, and each county, like each county is different, but they're all, the central office is, well, it's a centralized system where you know, each county is like part of like this larger state-run system. In Pennsylvania, each county is independent on its own. Each county is responsible for providing the services on their own. And in some places you have, like I described in Maryland, you have people who are public defenders, they work for an organization or the state. But some places, this more often in the South, in like smaller towns, you have private attorneys, attorneys who are in private practice, and then they contract with the government for like a flat rate to provide services to people. You know, so again, it's going to, so in a place like that, how much you make is going to depend on how many cases you take. You know, some other places it's going to, you know, depend on the salary. But you know, but again, if you're starting out, you're fresh out of law school and you don't necessarily have a family, or you know, maybe you're married and you've got a small family, you know, you'll make a living. And as your family grows over the years, you know, your salary will likewise grow over the years. And you know, and it'll go up, you know. So eventually, you know, you'll get into more, you know, closer to 6 figures and beyond 6 figures if you stick around. A lot of people don't. They use it as a stepping stone because you get a lot of litigation experience right out the gate. If you go to like a big firm coming straight out of law school, you're going to be doing a lot of like legal grunt work. You're not going to be in court. You know, you're just going to be, you know, doing other things and working hard, but you won't be in court. But with like becoming a public defender and some other legal aid organizations where you're in court a lot, you get a lot of in-court experience. And then some people, rather than stick around, you know, maybe they stick around 3-4 years, and then they go to a private firm for more money, and with the you know, with the experience, you know, that they obtain. So there's different ways to go about it.
Can you tell us about your kind of thought process? How did you get into law and what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I've you know, personally, you know, been arrested like over 20 times, and it was during a particular traffic stop. So and several of those times where I'd previously been arrested was just for driving without a license, because in DC, most places aren't like this, but in DC, if you're driving with, and actually DC is not even like this anymore, I don't think. They probably are, I don't know. But if you were caught driving without a license, they'd arrest you, like, you know, automatically. Like I said, most other places they're not necessarily like that, but DC was. And so there was this one, and I often didn't have a license, because another thing that happens is if you have too many tickets, you know, they'll suspend your license. And I think, you know, a lot of places are like that. And so for one reason or another, you know, I often in my younger, you know, my 20s, I didn't have a license, you know, but I would drive anyway because I needed to. But on this one particular occasion, all my paperwork was straight. Like my license was straight, my car registration, insurance, everything, just like totally legit driver. And I get pulled over, and it was a pretext stop. Pretext stop is when the police stop you and they really don't care about the traffic violation. They want to search for drugs and guns and just harass you. And so I got pulled over, and because all of my paperwork was straight, I thought this was going to be like a regular traffic stop, like you see on TV. You know, what seems to be the problem, officer? So, you know, they come, you know, they like kind of surround the car, and you know, they pull me over, and it was some brief discussion. You know, I think I was asking him, what'd you pull me over for? He doesn't want to answer the question. He's getting irritated. I'm getting irritated. And eventually he's telling me to get out the car. And I'm refusing to get out the car. And eventually he says, by the way, like when you get stopped by the cops, don't ever roll your window all the way down. Just crack it. I mean, unless you have tinted windows. If you have tinted windows, the cops, they do have a right to be able to see in the vehicle for their own safety. So if you have tinted windows, that, you know, you will have to comply with them asking you to roll the windows all the way down. But if your car is like mine is now, no tinted windows, they can see inside the car, they don't have a right to have you roll the windows down. And for your own safety, I suggest just cracking the window enough to hand out your driver's license and your insurance and your registration, whatever paperwork they need. They'll probably ask you to roll the window down, and you tell them no. But anyway, and I just thought of that because in this instance, my window was rolled down, and so he was able to reach in and like, actually that didn't happen on this occasion, but in previous occasions they just reach in and they unlock the door and they open it. So he's asking me to get out the car, and then eventually he says, "If you don't get out the car, I'm going to pull you through this effing window." And so like everything like kind of like stopped for me at that moment, because I had been previously in fights with the police, which you're not going to win because they're going to jump you, they're going to mace you, they'll tase you. I've never been tased, but when I was young, like tasers have just become more like ubiquitous probably in the past 10 or 15 years. You know, but if they had tasers back then, I probably would have gotten tased, but you know, definitely gotten you know, maced, beaten, and roughed up. So, and then you end up getting arrested anyway. They take your car. It's just like a whole thing. So, but on this occasion, like I said, I stopped and I was like, man, I don't feel like it today. I don't feel like, you know, all of that today. So I agreed. I got out the car, and you know, so now they're searching the car. It's an illegal search. I didn't really know that then, but I know now. You know, they didn't have a right to do what they were doing. But, you know, as I'm standing there, I just felt very, you know, like humiliated and emasculated. And, you know, it was then where I made the decision, like, no, I'm going to law school because I can't fight these people on the street, but I can fight them on their own turf, so to speak. And so from my experience and other experiences of people I know, personally, and people I don't know, you know, people I've admired as historical figures who have, you know, fought for, you know, justice and freedom and things of that nature, such as if you read the bio, like, you know, H. Rap Brown, who's now Imam Jamil Alameen, you know, people came out of formations like the Black Panther Party and stuff like that. I had a chance to meet some of the attorneys who defended, you know, people like that. And so also at the time, there was a lot of like fervor around, you know, it kind of started with the war, you know, a lot of anti-war protests and stuff like that. And then there was Agena 6 and some other things that really brought you know, police brutality and warmongering to the forefront. And so there was a lot of movement against that. What was that, Occupy Wall Street, all of this stuff. So I saw that, you know, we were kind of moving back into an era of civil disturbance and probably leading towards the more intense level of state repression, people being arrested, criminalized for, you know, for their activism. And so I thought that being trained as a criminal defense attorney, you know, I'd be able to contribute that service, you know, to the movement, you know, so to speak, you know, if and when the time came. So between that and, like I said, my personal experiences and experiences of others who I had personal relationships with, especially in DC, man, when the DC jail, you know, DC might be, it used to be more than 50% Black. It's not anymore. It's probably more like 40%. There's a lot of you know, Latinos in DC now, white people moving in. But nevertheless, DC jail is still almost exclusively Black. It's bizarre. It's like, all right, well, I'm on a tangent, but that's what you know, led me to law school. Just wanting to be, I wanted to be be a public defender, a criminal defense attorney, and I wanted to protect people from getting locked up, especially in instances where people didn't have adequate representation, which is often the case.
Right. Right. Musa has a question. Go ahead.
Has being arrested and being in prison made it harder or easier for you to reach out to your clients, and also on the side of getting a job or being able to work with both sides of the aisle?
Yeah, it made it both. So it made it harder because so you've all probably heard of the bar exam. You know, it's an exam you have to take in order to practice law in the state where you're in. Each state has their own bar exam. After you have a certain amount of experience, like I'm barred in Pennsylvania, I don't have to take the DC bar now or the Maryland bar. I can just waive in. I can apply, you know, to waive in. Some states like California, they still want you to take their bar. So everyone, for the most part, has heard of the bar exam. And they think you pass the bar, you get to practice law. But there's another component to being able to be barred and to be licensed to practice law in a particular jurisdiction, and that's the character and fitness evaluation, which is basically a background check. And so while I passed the bar exam in Pennsylvania, I wasn't allowed to practice law because I failed the character and fitness examination. Not examination, or it's kind of an investigation, background check, you know, however you want to call it. So I had to appeal. I had to appeal that decision. And Pennsylvania is, again, like each state is a little bit different. So if the same thing would have happened in Maryland, I wouldn't have been just denied outright. They would have had a hearing to bring me in to question me about whatever it was they were questioning about. Pennsylvania, they just deny you, you appeal, and then you have a hearing, you know, such as I described. But the whole process took a year. You know, I had to, you know, gather some, you know, character, you know, witnesses and stuff. And so, it held up my career for a year. You know, so I wasn't getting paid, you know, as an attorney. I was getting paid as a law clerk, which was considerably less money. You know, so it hurt in that sense, but it helped in the sense that, especially going into the field I went into, having that lived experience, you know, on the other side, you know, as you put it, you know, having been in court as a defendant, having been arrested, having gone to jail, you know, that is kind of a unique experience, especially in this career field. And it has the potential to provide a deeper level of understanding of the system itself, of people, your clients, and being able to relate and understand. And it just brings a different, you know, flavor to your work. So, and so as I applied for jobs, it was actually something that was a positive, it was good for the type of jobs I was applying for. Now, if I would have just been applying for, you know, some big private law firm, they probably wouldn't have been very enthusiastic about my criminal history. But because I was applying to work for the type of organizations I was applying to work for, where the clients very likely had the same type of lived experience I did, you know, it was a good fit, and it was a desirable addition to my resume. So I was able to take advantage of it and work it to my benefit career-wise.
So when I asked you about like what got you into the career, do you, like, now that you've been in it, you said about 20 years or so, do you
No,
do you find that same?
since 2016.
Oh, it's 2016. So okay. So do you feel that satisfaction? Do you feel like you've been able to kind of get to what you originally wanted to get when you got into the field?
So this is an interesting question. All right. So I became Muslim in 2021. I mean, 2001. But I went through, some years, honestly, where I wasn't like practicing, like actively. Like, I mean, I still consider myself Muslim, but I wasn't practicing. I wasn't being a good Muslim. And part of that period of backsliding, coincided with my time at law school. When I graduated law school, and I can't remember if it was when I graduated or it was probably after I took the bar exam, because you don't really feel any relief till you get that part over with. But either or, let's just say when I graduated. When I graduated law school, I was overcome with like this feeling that I had been using so much of my energy, my mental energy, my emotional energy, money, time, just my capacity to contribute as a human being had all been with very little of it had been dedicated, to Allah, and to, my religion. And I felt bad about that. And so it was after I graduated law school that I gradually began to, claw my way back into being a practicing Muslim. Alhamdulillah, I happened to be going to Philadelphia. So it kind of got me out of DC, where, I had been involved in things I shouldn't have been involved in. And just in a new area that happened to have a whole lot of Muslims everywhere. So it was a nice environment to be in. And so, that was 7 years ago. And so as I've, become, more like deeply invested in, being a Muslim, I've come to feel more interested in that part of, my existence. So now work, I mean, alhamdulillah, I've been, blessed to do something that does have a positive impact on people's lives and clients I come in contact with. But personally, as long as I'm making enough money to take care of my family, like I don't really have career ambitions in the same way that I've had in the past. Like my ambition, is more, geared towards, Akhira, and trying to be, a good Muslim. Like I've a lot more disconnected, to the dunya than I've probably been in my life. So it's made me a bit more, happy-go-lucky in a way, because I know I'm, focusing on the thing that matters most, which is Allah, my family, and the type of work I do. It's really, more than anything, it's just a means for me to provide, for them, and to just, you need the dunya for what you need it for, but beyond that, so I'll, continue to work. And like I said earlier, I mean, the more years you have been as a practicing attorney, the more you can command as a salary, whether I'm at the job I'm at now or whether I go somewhere else, so, my career is going to take care of itself. And so I'm not really worried about it. I don't think too much about it anymore. I mean, I do want to make more money, but just for the reasons I mentioned, not because like I want to spend it on stuff. I just want to be able to provide more for my family, as the case may be. And so but like I said, I know I'll be getting a raise every year, and eventually I might make another lateral move, for more money. But yeah, so.
All right. Musa, question?
You had mentioned that you had been arrested, more than 20 times. How had that affected you getting into law school, outside of taking the bar exam? And how has that kind of made it difficult for you to try to like get into higher positions as a lawyer and as an attorney?
Well, as far as my job, I mean, that's, it doesn't really matter anymore. Like, no one's, asking me about about that kind of stuff. So it's like, if I mention it, then people know. If I don't mention it, people don't know. But I mention it, when it's relevant to mention it. I mean, it's not anything I'm ashamed of. And so, sometimes it's relevant to bring up. For example, I'll be in Dallas next month. No, well, in July, I was invited to speak on a panel of attorneys who had, previously been incarcerated at some point in their life. So, sometimes it's a good story. People appreciate it. But as far as getting into law school, it did. I'm pretty sure it affected me getting into law school, partly because when you're applying, schools are, of course, well, maybe it's not obvious, but the schools are concerned with whether or not you're going to pass the bar, because your bar passage rate and your and acceptance rate, it's those are statistics that schools keep. And so if you look at a candidate and he's like, well, this guy's got good grades, he looks like he's probably smart, but is he going to be able to get into the bar with all this stuff he had going on? So I don't know if it was that, but I know that the acceptance committee at the school I went to, they were divided. I only learned this later. The dean of my law school was one of my character witnesses when I had to go through the character and fitness appeal, and she shared this. I didn't know it before, but the not the hiring committee, but the acceptance, let's call them the acceptance committee for the law school, they were divided about whether or not they were going to admit me. The admissions committee, that's what it's called. They were divided about whether or not they would admit me, and I think the majority voted no. But the dean of the law school, she saw something in me that she liked, and she had the power, as in that position, to have a special admission, like a dean, like a veto. Like, I'm the dean, he's coming whether y'all like it or not, and I'm going to use my prerogative to allow him admission. And so I was a dean admit. The committee. And I got accepted to a couple other law schools too, but they were further. And I got waitlisted at University of Maryland. They eventually offered me a spot, but I was already going to UDC, so I turned it down. But so yeah, it helped me up going to law school, but it didn't make it impossible. Like, it's just. I guess that answers your question. I don't want.
Yeah. Amin, what's your question?
I was gonna ask, I had heard from someone that unless you're get a really high end like law university, it is difficult to get a first job in a law position. How is that for you? Is it easy or hard?
Well, man, I got the job I wanted. So but I took a different approach with how I built my resume. So well, first of all, whoever said that, it's I don't think that's true. It might be true for certain positions, certain law firms. They're only going to hire people from like the top 10 schools, or top of the class from the top 10 schools. There are some jobs that are competitive in that way. You know, like they're looking at where you went to school and where you were ranked in the school that you went to. You were on law review, that kind of stuff. So there are some jobs that are like that. But as far as the legal field is concerned, being a lawyer, you know, depends on what type of law you want to practice. But what school you go to, you know, that doesn't necessarily matter. What does matter, in my opinion, is what you do while you're at school, the type of internships that you do. Like, law school isn't a place where you want to go try to find yourself. You want to know what you're doing. Now, if you change your mind along the way, then, you know, alhamdulillah. But if you go to law school, you should know what kind of law you want to practice. You should know what you want to do. That will also help you. Law school isn't easy, and when it gets difficult, if you know why you're there, it's not as difficult. But if you're just there, like, I didn't know what to do after I graduated college, I guess I'll go to law school. If you're just there because it's something to do and you didn't know what else to do, you know, it's going to like hurt your feelings when you're you know, when it gets tough. But if you do have an idea of what you want to do, then, you know, you'll look for internships within that field, and you build up your resume, you know, through the internships that you take. Like, for me, that was what I focused on. Like, I did several internships at different. I interned at the public defender in DC. I interned at the public defender in Alexandria, Virginia. I did an internship at a public defender in Charlotte, North Carolina. I went there because that was one of the few places where they allowed their summer interns to actually practice law. So I was able to go into court and try cases as a summer intern. So that was good experience. And so by the end of law school, I could, you know, people are hiring, they often want to see, you know, a demonstrated interest in doing this particular thing, or a demonstrated ability to do this particular thing. You know, well, you know, I've demonstrated it, I've done it. You know, whereas if you're just, you know, doing random things, you know, any legal experience is, you know, I mean, it's better than nothing. But if it's more aligned with what you're trying to do when you get out, like that's going to be a more pivotal, you know, factor in getting a job, like experience. Just like any job you apply for now, they want to see your resume, they want to see your experience. And so if your experience is more than that of your peer who's applying for the same job, like that's going to go a long way. You know, they look at some, you know, they might look at your grades, especially your first job out, but after your first job, no one's looking. I shouldn't say no one. It still comes up from time to time, but it's much less likely for people to care about your transcript with whatever, you know, as you apply for your second and third jobs out of law school. You know, so, you know, you want to get in, you know, get in where you can, you know, get in, you know, where a place that makes sense, you know, for you, whether it's economic considerations, geographic considerations. Some places have special clinics. Well, all law schools have clinics, but some schools may have a clinic of an area of law that you're actually interested in. You know, so, you know, those are things, you know, that'll help you make your decision. But, you know, I mean, and if you get into Harvard or Yale, you know, go. Like, it definitely don't hurt to have a Harvard or Yale degree, probably in any academic discipline. But you don't have to feel like, oh, I just got into, I don't know, the University of Mississippi, you know, so my career is over. Like, no, like, you know, you'll be able to make your way, you know, no matter what. You know, you just go and you finish and you pass the bar, and you know, you'll be all right, I think.
Let us take a 5-minute break. We'll just say our prayers here, and then we'll come back, inshallah. All right, Bismillah. I wanted to ask you about so you mentioned the internships and, you know, just studying hard, kind of doing the work while you're in law school. But you also mentioned like you want to kind of know your mind and know what you're doing before you get there. You have suggestions for that? How does this person figure out that law school's for them, or what kind of law before they get there?
Um,
I mean, you had your own personal experience, but maybe something more
yeah,
generalizable.
I mean, there's so many things. I mean, some people go to law school without the intention of actually like practicing law. Like, so, you know, they may want to use it because law degree is very, it's very flexible in the part of your brain that you develop and the skills that you obtain, you know, through going to law school. But
What
as
are some
far
of those other things you could do besides just practicing law
as
that would be kind of
well,
tied, relevant to law? Like, what are
I
other
mean,
things?
it might not even be entirely relevant as such. Like, but just a law degree is is uh, is a respected degree, and you know, just about like any field. Like, you know, so no matter what you're doing, if you happen to also have a law degree, you're going to be an attractive candidate. Like, I don't think there's any field where you know, someone would scoff, well, not necessarily, or just like be uninterested in the fact that you have a law degree. I think it would be appealing in just about any field, except to the extent that they may feel like they need to pay you more, and they don't want to pay someone more for a position, you know, that doesn't necessarily require one. But you know, your critical thinking skills, you know, writing, investigation, you know, it's helpful. But as far as the field itself, I mean, you know, some lawyers like go to court and litigate. You know, some legal positions don't involve litigation at all. It could be, you know, compliance. And you know, companies, they have to comply with the law. And so, or you know, companies, organizations, you know, there's laws. Here's one way to think about it. There's laws for everything, especially in a country like this. Like, you know, even you know, down to the you know, this shirt I'm wearing. You know, I mean, it's a cotton shirt, but you know, there's going to be laws that dictate, you know, how the shirt is produced and whether or not the company that makes this shirt is in compliance with the labor laws, you know, that involve production, shipping, transportation. You know, definitely, you know, food, whether it's the growing the food, it's the selling the food. Like, there's always going to be laws or regulations, which is you call that administrative law when it's not, you know, a law like when it's more like you know. So administrative law is going to be could be within the government. So for example, you know, so if where you live, there are going to be like, if you're renting, there's going to be codes that the renter has to follow in order to get a renter's license. That type of law is going to be what's called administrative. So it's not, so it's handled within the organization. You're not necessarily, if there's a problem, you're not necessarily going to court to like the courthouse downtown. It would be more like an in-house thing according to the regulations of that particular agency. You know, and so you know, so some people are you know, providing legal advice to, you know, their employer. You know, there's laws, you know, that having to do with science, you know, patents. So whatever you're like, kind of, if you have a particular interest, like, there is almost like inevitably going to be, you know, some area of law that, you know, has something to do, with that interest of yours. So could be, I don't know. Just trying to think of a random example. Yeah, I can't think of anything right now, but yeah, so I mean, you can start with where your interests lie, and you can look and see if there's, some areas, around that. I know, a lot of people, in immigrant communities, their parents may be looking for them to be a doctor or engineer or something like that. You can go into the legal field, and do medical malpractice, or like I said, compliance, within the hospital. Engineering. Again, there's going to be lawyers. There are going to be laws that have to do with whatever area of engineering it is. I don't know what's new, like AI, ChatGPT, this kind of new stuff. Like, there's going to be laws developed that, it could actually end up being a whole new area of law, dealing with, artificial intelligence and stuff like that. So, this is definitely a country of laws, a lot of rules, a lot of regulations, and there's there's people that got to deal with that. So there's so many areas, but often, like from what we see in TV, we're only thinking of the areas of law that have like components of litigation.
Right.
But only a small, I can't remember the statistic, but only like 10% of lawyers are actually litigators. Most lawyers do other stuff. And then the litigators, a lot of them, they don't actually want to go to court. They want to like fight the case and deal with it out of court and eventually reach a settlement.
Another question I like to ask all of our guests is, like, if you've come across, it's like Dini problems with study or practice of your field, like a place where you feel like this is going against your Islamic duty, or like it's challenging your Islamic values, that kind of a thing, where you've had to make some choice to avoid or change directions or stuff like that because of the conflict.
No, I don't think so. I have had people raise questions about, especially with the area I practice in, well, what if the person is guilty? And it's
Yeah, what do you say to that? If the person's guilty, how do you defend them? What's
well,
the justification ethically for you?
well, ethically, even if a person is guilty, they still have a right to defend themselves in court. And guilt is often, very nuanced, in the sense of what you're accused of, because every crime, like, there's elements to the crime. And they have to prove each, in order to find a person guilty, they have to, this is according to their laws. You have to prove each element, and you have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So that's their rule, and that's often a pretty high bar. Because you can, like, if you're ever sitting on a jury, you'll be instructed as a juror, like, even if you feel like you as a juror, not necessarily the attorney, but like you're pretty confident that the person did it. Like, you would bet money that the person did the thing. That's still not enough to convict them. Like, you have to feel like you're absolutely sure, there's no doubt about it. So if there's like a maybe, like, I don't know, like with the evidence that's been presented to you, you feel like, it's, yeah, I guess, it could have been this other scenario. Like, you can't convict the person under that circumstance. So often, if you're dealing with the client who did what they did, maybe they got caught red-handed, like, you're going to court to, in the angle that you're taking is whether or not the police and the prosecution like followed all the rules. So if there's a traffic stop and somebody has drugs in the trunk, if the police pull them over and without a warrant, without permission, they just start going in the person's trunk, they're probably going to lose that case because they won't be able to use that evidence because it was obtained from an illegal search. And there's a lot of rules that the police are supposed to follow in the way they investigate and obtain evidence, and sometimes they don't follow all the rules. Sometimes you're fighting, if you have a murder, the issue might not be, obviously there's a dead body, so the issue isn't necessarily whether or not this person was killed, but it could be, well, was it premeditated or not? And then you're arguing, or you're fighting for the lesser grade of a particular crime because whatever it is that they're accused of doing, it's something missing that doesn't reach this element. Like if it's theft, the difference between a felony theft and a misdemeanor theft could be the value of the item that's been stolen. It's not a question of whether or not it was stolen, it's a question of whether or not the value of what it is or something like that. So sometimes you're dealing with with that angle of reducing the crime. Sometimes it's about whether or not the prosecution did their job legally, and just holding them to their burden. The burden of proof is on the government to prove their case, and so you just hold them to their burden. And if in the course of that, like they're doing spotty, half-hearted police work, and they just, then yeah, the person's going to walk because you didn't do your job, and that's on you. It's not on me. As far as knowing a person is guilty, like you can't, like if you know a person is going to get on the stand and lie, you're not ethically, as far as the ethics of the legal profession and the rules of professional responsibility, you cannot put someone on the stand who's going to lie. So you can't go coach somebody to say, well, say this, don't say that, because you can't coach somebody to testify dishonestly. You can't allow someone to testify if you know they're going to testify dishonestly. Even if they're on the stand, if it's your client and they're on the stand and they start saying something and it's a lie. Like I've never been in that situation, but I think you like ask for a recess, or but you can't go on like that. So honesty is still important, and and often, especially in this society and in this day and age, like prisons are not helpful. People go to jail unless they did something super heinous, like they're eventually going to get out. And so, people go to jail for a long time. They're mistreated. It's like an inhumane environment, and you come out and you're worse off than you were when you went in. So personally, I feel the way this society is, like with so much of the bad things that this country does, like you don't have a right to be punishing anybody, especially like that. So that's my personal feeling, that like jails is like, yeah, someone might have did something, but sending them to jail, like that's not going to help, and like that's not that's just not going to be a good thing. Now, I mean, the career I've had up to this point, it's easy for me to say that, when you're dealing with relatively minor crimes. I've had some felonies, but I mean, I haven't like defended any murderers, child molesters, rapists, or anything like that. So, it could be harder for me to have that same attitude, but so far, fortunately, I haven't had to deal with those types of cases. But but again, like even if it is, it's about whether or not they have the evidence to support their case, and and they bring it in a way that satisfies their burden of proving their case beyond a reasonable doubt.
It almost sounds like a defender is a compliance lawyer for the government, for the court
In a
itself.
lot of ways, you are.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, you are. You're often defending the Constitution. Like that's part of your defense, because there's a manner in which, like all laws of search and seizure, the Bill of Rights, like those are things that defense attorneys use. Like prosecution isn't saying anything about the Constitution or anything like that. That's the defense attorney's job to make sure the Constitution is being followed. So you're exactly right. And often, like, that's the approach that you're taking, especially when someone, whether or not they did the thing that they're accused of, it's pretty obvious they did.
Right. All right. Well, time is up. Thank you so much for the Naji. It's very interesting, and it was a good perspective for youth to have.
Alhamdulillah, hopefully it was helpful. And if anyone has any questions later, I think you all have my contact information, and you're free to give it to anyone you like. That's fine with me. I'm pretty much an open book and easily accessible.
All right. Jazakumullah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum.